Hello once again, this is Jeff Scott of Blackhawk Technical College. The class is 152-158, Advanced Website Development for the Fall 2016 semester. We are up to Chapter 7 in our SAM's Teach Yourself Bootstrap in 24 Hours text. Chapter 7, which starts in the book on page 89, is entitled Bootstrap Topography. And you can see we have 4 different objectives. How Bootstrap uses topography, how to create headlines and headers, how to modify body copy topography, and how Bootstrap adjusts text elements. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. Web pages are primarily text, but believe it or not, unless you've got a product that you're selling and that product is out there in the forefront with picture after picture after picture, probably most people who come to your site are looking for text. So in this hour, as it says, we learn the default Bootstrap typography styles and what we might want to consider as far as changing those in a website. So we'll discuss the basic fonts and forms Bootstrap uses by default, and then talk about how to use headings, basically, for lack of better words, to make it better. Bootstrap, notice if you look at the end there, it adjusts the look and feel of some HTML elements, so we'll talk about that as well. Now, it says Bootstrap takes care of basic typography for you. You don't need to worry about which font family to use. Okay, well, maybe that's true. All right, as far as these are the default kinds of fonts that it's going to use. These are the sizes that it's going to use, for example, for H1, 8 through H6. But that does not necessarily mean that that's exactly what you're going to want to use. All right? Notice it says, this means that text on the page will start out in a sans serif font at 10 pixels. But because Bootstrap pages have a body tag, all right, they will immediately be changed to the following font stack. Helvetica New, I guess it is, Helvetica Arial Sans Serif. A font stack is a list that's ordered by design preference. So in other words, the system will look, and if you have that font, it'll use that by default. If you don't, it'll go to that one. If you don't, it'll go to that one. And if you don't, it'll go to that one. Normally, when you've got a font family like this, the last one that you put in there is either a serif font or a sans serif font, because virtually every kind of machine has those kinds of fonts. All right. Now, you'll notice right away the Helvetica Neue is not a default system font on all computers. So it says if you notice you're having a problem, add this line to override the font stack. So in other words, now what you're saying is start with Arial. If you can't find Arial, go to Helvetica, then go to Helvetica Neue, then go to sans serif. And since you're putting the important directive on there, you're saying override what would be there by default. All right. It says, note, Bootstrap 3 font sizes are not best practices. One complaint about Bootstrap topography is that it doesn't use relative font sizes like M's and Rems, etc. I believe that there's going to be more support for that in version 4 of Bootstrap, but until then, we're not going to worry about it, okay? All right. Most web pages use headings. Bootstrap provides default styles for headings. As you can see there, it adds styles for different kinds of headings. All right. What you see on your screen right here in this figure is the same figure that's shown in the book 7-1. It's on the bottom of page 91 of the book. And you can see here when you take a look the associated HTML that you could use with that. Now, notice it says one nice feature about Bootstrap is the ability to create an inline, which means it'll come right afterwards, an inline subheader using the small tag. So when you do that, what's going to happen is it's going to immediately change the size. So the inline header is here with secondary text, where the main header is headline. So you can see in every case it's going to be smaller. There's also a small class that Bootstrap provides to add secondary text to inline headers. Now this looks really ugly what they've shown here, but notice what they're trying to do is they're trying to show this, for lack of better words, in perspective. So you're seeing all these inside of paragraphs. Okay? All right. You aren't limited to text headlines in Bootstrap. You can create graphic headlines. You can replace text with other things. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do here. Now, in the next example that's here, it says Bootstrap lets you replace text headlines with images. In just a couple of steps, you can create a custom headline so that Bootstrap is also accessible and SEO friendly. And if we look at the line they have here, they basically, for lack of better words, have used an image in there. And we've talked about this, and I've talked about some of the places that you can go that you can write. We talked about this in the Uber lecture, that there are places that you can go to create stuff like this, logos and banners, etc. All right. Well, I'm not sure if this will work or not, but let's try it anyway. So this is image replacement here. I suppose the chance of this actually working are maybe slim to none, but we'll try it anyway. We don't have the heading at all, which I would think means, and I'm going to go back and quickly take a look at it. So we've got all the text that goes with it. We should have the style sheet. We need this here. Images headline.ping. I believe that's probably at least all we're missing. So let's see if we can find that. Probably making a big to-do about nothing here, but I like to take a look at it myself and see how similar we can make it look to what they show. So let's see, here's the examples. And this is 7.4. That's just the code, so we still need to get a copy of that headline.ping, and I'm not sure where that would be. All right, URL images headline ping, I understand that, but what we need is this. So that's what it should look like if we had the image. We don't have the image, but just so you see, again, that's what it would look like. All right. Sorry if I was not able to replicate that for you. In many ways, I guess you could look at it as this particular chapter is a little bit, let's just say, boring next to the chapter we just looked at, because the chapter we just looked at was all image related in nature. We looked at labels and we looked at badges and wells and panels, etc. And in here we're basically working with text, which is not going to nearly be as, what do you call it, what you know, sexy or whatever you call it. All right, Bootstrap adds a component to help call out a header on a web page. Okay, you may or may not be able to tell this, but it's got the little box around the headline. As it says, it's got a 9-pixel bottom padding to add more space. In other words, you're trying to do it to make it stand out. All right. Body copy is the majority of text. Well, yeah, that's everything that you find basically that's not a heading. All right, it's your div text, but mainly it's your paragraph text. As it says, with Bootstrap, you can put your body copy straight into the body, include it in divs, or put it in p tags. Now, one thing that they'll talk about, if it's not in this chapter, it'll be in a later chapter, by putting things in paragraphs, even if they're inside of a div, typically what's going to happen by you doing that is it's going to look much more professional. All right. Bootstrap gives paragraphs a small typography boost by adding a bottom margin. All right. So it looks a little bit nicer. Okay. So the first paragraph, as it says, does not have any space between it and the second because this first paragraph here is not inside of a p tag. These are, so you can see between the paragraphs the fact that you've got some space. Since this one is not, you don't. So I guess this is what I meant to show you. Best practices recommend you always include blocks of text inside of paragraph tags. For lack of better words, I'll give you even another reason for doing it. It looks more natural. All right. Add some, I think this is actually pronounced lead, to some copy. A lead is often highlighted in some way to make it stand out from the main text. So if you notice in the example here, it's bigger in size. It's not bolder, but it's bigger in size so that it stands out. Just be real leery if you use this because it's very easy to try to overuse this. All right, there's a lot of difference between doing that whole paragraph and just doing a few words. All right? All right. Inline text, as you can see here, and this is taken from your book from the middle of page 99. And as the author mentions here, there's a number of HTML elements available for you to use with different aspects of text. Now notice the delete, it's got a line through. All right, would you use that? Probably not on a real site, but if you were working on a site with others and you wanted to show that there was something in there that you removed so that they could see what you did, that might be a reason to use something like that. Many of the other ones, you know, the insert, it's got a line under it, the mark, which is a different color, the S, which looks a lot like delete, small, we've talked about before, bolding and underlining. Okay. As it says, if you need them to look differently than their defaults, you can always add styles with your own personal style sheet. You can use text with many different things in here to align things in one way. And also there's pull left and pull right. All right, notice this. Do not use the pull on navigation elements. All right. In hour 12, we'll look at separate ways that you can float things more naturally to the left or right for navigation. So we're talking about basically your navigation type of menu. And they give, you know, this is one of the reasons that I chose this text, is I like the fact that the author talks about something and then she demonstrates it. As it says, they do exactly what they appear to do and position text on the left, right, or center, and they show you some pull right and pull left examples also. Transform, you may have seen this in other languages, where you can capitalize to capitalize the first letter in each word, and that does even words that wouldn't be capitalized in some other place, you know, some other packages like the, or, and, or etc. I believe that this is by default will capitalize the first letter of every word. Then there's lowercase and uppercase. The helper classes can be used, as it says, to add an element to change the text and background colors. Well, if you look, these very much dovetail with the buttons and the other things that we've looked at in other chapters as far as their color. There you go. They may not be exact, but they're very close in nature. One thing about this, notice it says there's 5 HTML tags you can use to define code. Bootstrap has styles for all of them. Well, the recommendation really is that you take a look at all of them. Code, keyboard, the pre-tag, all right, the SAMP tag, and the var tag. But when you do that, probably what you're going to want to do is find one or two that you're most comfortable with. You might have to do some mixing and matching, but use those throughout the site. Again, I don't think I think I'm not telling you anything you already don't know. But again, it is just amazing the number of people who do things like this and think that for whatever reason they have to do a lot of mixing and matching and use all of them. When normally what that does is rather than help, it hurts a website and makes it harder to read things that are on it. All right, quotations, as it says, Bootstrap uses block quote for long quotations. All right, and if you take a look, here's an example. The font's larger. It's got the gray border on the side. And the little footer part that goes along with it is smaller, and the font is a little bit different. All right. And you can set that up in many ways. This is the default, but you can set it up the other way. Why would you want to do one versus the other? Depends on where in the page it's presented. Sometimes it's just for aesthetic reasons. All right. Using lists, very similar to things we've looked at in other classes. Unstyled here to remove the default styles on the list. Inline places all items on a single line with a little padding in between them, more like that. Horizontal, which places the terms and descriptions side by side. Again, it's like the DL and DD tags. All right, just a couple more things in here. The first are abbreviations. As it says, Bootstrap adds some default styles to the standard ABBR tags. All right. When you use abbreviations that are all caps, the capital letters will make the text look larger than it is. So there is an initial ISM class that you can use to knock that down. They show an example of it here. Finally, addresses. HTML provides an address tag, typically again for contact information. As it says, it adds a larger bottom margin and it resets the font style and the height. So this chapter was about Bootstrap typography, not a very exciting chapter, but we went over a few things, as always, that are important for you to realize. All right, when I apply the pull right or pull left, they still take up the full width of the page. How do I fix that? HTML automatically fills the horizontal space available unless you add a width. All right, so here you're telling it to only take up 30%, for example. Do I have to use the colors that are defined in the helper class? We've talked about this before. No, you do not. If you want to change them, yes, you are able to change them. But if you do change them, all right, you want to do it in your own personal style sheet. And if you don't want to do that, as we'll learn in Chapter 23, you can use less, the preprocessor, and you can use something that's called mixins. We'll get to that much later on in the course. All right, number 1 on the quiz. What happens if a browser doesn't have the Helvetica Neue? Okay, and the answer is A, it displays it in Helvetica. Number 2, what does it mean that a font property is inherited? Well, that means it's B, it's defined by a parent element and passed along. Number 3, what is the pixel size of the line height of body copy? And the answer is D, that the line height is not defined in pixels. Number 4, how do you define headlines in Bootstrap? The answer is both A and B, using H1 through H6 tags and .H1 through .H6 tags. Number 5, what does the .led class do? It makes text larger. Number 6, how do you center a paragraph text? You use the .text -center. Number 7, how do you make text uppercase in Bootstrap? You use the .text dash uppercase class. Number 8, which of these is not a Bootstrap helper class? It's d.background/danger. Number 9, which of these is not a code HTML tag for Bootstrap styles? It's TTC. And number 10, why do you use the initialism class? The answer is B, to make all cap abbreviations appear to be more the same size. All right. So that pretty much puts to rest Chapter 7, so I'm going to go on to Chapter 8. And Chapter 8, as you can see right here, is on the topic of tables. So I'll be back with that shortly.